Welcome to You Brew Kombucha. Today we're going to talk about whether or not moving affects your kombucha brews. So you might notice that I'm in a totally different location than some of the other YouTube videos that I've filmed on this channel, and that's because I've moved. And so if you've moved from one home to another recently and you're wondering if the move can affect your kombucha brews, I actually have some firsthand experience that I can share with you about that. I will add the disclaimer that everybody's scobies are different and made of different yeasts and bacteria, and obviously there are a lot of variables that go into the kombucha homebrewing process, so I won't pretend that my experience will be the same as all of yours. But what I've found from my brews is that after moving to my new apartment, SCOBY growth has been pretty minimal. Usually my scobies have been pretty thick after even just a week of brewing kombucha. And here I found that even after maybe a week and a half or so, SCOBY growth is still pretty minimal. I will say, as I've mentioned in other videos, that SCOBY growth isn't really an indicator of doneness, so I'm not really worried at all about that. I really just go off of taste. So if the kombucha tastes good and tastes ready to bottle for me, that's when I go ahead and bottle it. It doesn't really matter whether or not the SCOBY is actually growing. And if you have more questions about that, I do have another video that I'll link in the description box down below that talks more about how to tell when your kombucha brew is done. But even though the SCOBY growth has been pretty minimal, I haven't noticed anything off about the taste of my brew. It's still been fermenting properly. It's still been acidifying, and it's still been carbonating just as well as when I was at my old apartment. So if you have concerns about moving, as a precaution, what I'd recommend, and this is what I did for the first few batches that I brewed when I got to my new place, is just increase the amount of starter tea that you add to your batches. And that'll help make sure that as the SCOBY is reacclimating to its new environment, it still has a good amount of acidity to kickstart that fermentation process and really get it going. So I usually recommend using about 2 cups of strong starter tea per gallon batch. When I moved, the first few batches that I brewed, I used 3 cups of starter tea instead. And it actually did acidify and ferment a little bit faster just because of the increased amount of starter tea that I used. But for me, it was worth making sure that I took that extra precaution just to make sure that the move didn't throw off the SCOBY's vibe in any way. Because the SCOBY is a collection of living organisms. It's a living thing. And so moving can affect it just by virtue of it being in a completely new environment with a whole new set of temperatures and variables and air quality that it now has to contend with. But again, as long as you like the way the kombucha tastes, I would say there isn't an issue. But I would just say take that extra step of adding a little bit more starter tea to kickstart that fermentation process, and then just keep a closer eye on it to see if it happens to ferment faster or slower than what you're used to at your old place. And as long as you don't see any signs of mold, then you're good to go. I hope that was helpful. Happy brewing!